They say silence is golden, but in the world of the ultra-elite, silence is a weapon. Tonight we are diving into a story that begins in the tear-stained reflection of a bathroom mirror and ends with the most satisfying public reckoning New York City has ever seen. When a ruthless mistress thought she had secured the ultimate prize, she made one fatal mistake. She mocked the wrong woman. She didn't know that the crying wife she tormented was the heiress to a dynasty that makes billionaires bow. This isn't just a breakup. It's a masterclass in revenge. Grab your popcorn. You're about to witness a dynasty war. The rain in Manhattan didn't fall. It felt like it was thrown against the glass, aggressive and relentless. Inside the penthouse of the Millennium Tower, 40 floors above the chaos of 57th Street, the silence was even louder than the storm. Artemis Anthea sat on the edge of the California king bed, the duvet bunched in her white-knuckled fists. The room smelled of Audrey's cologne, sandalwood, and ambition. It used to be a scent that made her feel safe, wrapped in the arms of the man who had swept her off her feet 5 years ago in a dusty coffee shop in Brooklyn. Now it just smelled like cold calculation. The door clicked open. Artemis didn't look up. She knew the cadence of those footsteps. Heavy, brisk, unapologetic. "You're still not packed," Audrey said. His voice wasn't angry. It was worse. It was indifferent. He walked past her to the walk-in closet, loosening his silk tie as he went. "The movers are coming at 8 tomorrow morning, Artemis. I don't want a scene." Artemis finally looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face devoid of makeup, her hair pulled back in a messy, defeated bun. She wore an oversized grey cardigan that swallowed her petite frame. To the outside world, she looked like a woman falling apart. "Is that all this is to you, Dom?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "A logistical issue, a scheduling conflict." Audrey stepped out of the closet, holding a fresh tuxedo shirt. He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in months. But there was no warmth in his hazel eyes, only a clinical assessment. "It's evolution, Artemis," he said, smoothing the shirt. "When we met, I was a junior analyst. You were... you. Sweet, simple, uncomplicated. But Anthea Corp isn't a start-up anymore. We're going public next quarter. I need a partner who can navigate the sharks, not someone who wants to stay home and bake bread." "I supported you," Artemis said, standing up. Her legs felt weak. "When you couldn't make rent, I paid it. When you needed seed money, You gave me your savings," Audrey cut in with a dismissive wave, "and I've paid you back 10 times over in the settlement. You're walking away with $5 million, Artemis. Don't act like a martyr. Most women would kill for that golden parachute." Before Artemis could respond, the front door buzzer rang. Audrey's face changed instantly. The indifference vanished, replaced by a bright, eager energy that made Artemis's stomach churn. "That's Chloe," he said, checking his watch. "She's bringing the finalized guest list for the gala tonight. Pull yourself together, Artemis. Please." Chloe Vane. The name tasted like battery acid. She walked in, without knocking, the click-clack of her Louboutins echoing on the marble floor. Chloe was everything Artemis currently wasn't: tall, impeccably groomed, sharp-edged, and radiating a predatory confidence. She wore a crimson dress that cost more than Artemis's first car, and her blonde hair was styled in a sleek, severe bob. "Dom, darling," Chloe purred, ignoring Artemis entirely as she breezed past to kiss Audrey on the cheek. She left a smudge of red lipstick on his jaw, marking her territory. The press is going wild about the merger rumors. Tonight is going to be absolute chaos. Good chaos. She turned her eyes, landing on Artemis with a look of mock surprise. "Oh," Chloe said, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. "You're still here? I thought the transition was happening today." "I live here," Artemis said, her voice trembling slightly despite her best efforts to steady it. Chloe laughed, a tinkling, icy sound. She walked over to Artemis, invading her personal space. She reached out and flicked a piece of lint off Artemis's grey cardigan. "Not for long, sweetie. And honestly, look at this place." Chloe gestured around the sleek, modern, minimalist room. "It's sharp. It's powerful. And you—" She looked Artemis up and down, curling her lip. "You're just a little frantic mouse caught in a skyscraper. You don't fit the furniture, let alone the man." Audrey was adjusting his cufflinks in the mirror, watching the interaction but saying nothing. His silence was the loudest betrayal of all. "Dom," Artemis said, ignoring Chloe. "I want to go to the gala tonight." Audrey froze. Chloe burst out laughing. "You—" Chloe scoffed. "Artemis, look in the mirror. You look like you've been crying for 3 days. The theme is midnight in Paris, not suburban depression. You'd be eaten alive. The photographers, the board members, they expect glamour. They expect power. I want closure." Artemis said, her eyes locking onto Audrey's reflection in the mirror. "We built this company's foundation together. I want to see it one last time before I sign the papers. I want to say goodbye properly." Audrey turned around. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Artemis, it's a black tie event. The VP of mergers from the Kensington Group might be there. We're trying to impress serious money. You're emotional." The mention of the Kensington Group made Artemis's breath hitch in her throat. She looked down at her hands to hide the sudden flash of panic and something else. Amusement. "I promise I won't cause a scene," Artemis said quietly. "I'll stay in the back. I just want to see you receive the Man of the Year award. Then I'll leave. I'll sign the papers tomorrow morning, and you'll never see me again." Audrey looked at Chloe. Chloe rolled her eyes, checking her nails. "Let her come, Dom," Chloe said, her voice dripping with venomous sweetness. "It'll be good for the press to see you're on amicable terms with the ex. Plus it'll highlight the upgrade when I'm standing next to you. Just make sure she stays near the buffet tables." Audrey nodded, relieved to have permission. "Fine, but find something decent to wear. And fix—" he gestured vaguely at her face. "Fix the eyes. The car leaves at 7. If you're not ready, we leave without you." Audrey and Chloe swept out of the room. Chloe laughing at something Audrey whispered in her ear. Artemis stood alone in the silence. She walked to the bathroom and locked the door. She looked at her reflection. Chloe was right. She looked broken, tired, weak. But Chloe was wrong about one thing. Artemis wasn't a mouse. She reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out a small, antiquated flip phone, a burner phone she had kept hidden in a shoebox for 5 years. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. She dialed a number she hadn't called since the day she ran away from her engagement party in London, desperate to escape the suffocating weight of her family name and find someone who loved her, not her inheritance. The phone rang twice. "Kensington Residence Chief of Staff speaking," a crisp British voice answered. "Arthur," Artemis said, her voice changing. The tremble was gone. In its place was a tone of steel and velvet, an accent that shifted from Brooklyn casual to the clipped aristocratic Queen's English of her youth. "It's Artemis." There was a heavy silence on the line. Then a gasp. "Lady Artemis, is it truly you?" Her ladyship has been— Put grandmother on the phone, Arthur. Now. Immediately, my lady. Seconds later, a sharp, imperious voice crackled through the line. It was a voice that could crash stock markets and dissolve governments. Artemis, the matriarch of the Kensington dynasty, Eleanor Kensington, said, 5 years. You vanish for 5 years. You pretend to be a pauper. And now you call— Are you in trouble? I was wrong, grandmother, Artemis said, staring at her red-rimmed eyes in the mirror. I thought I could live a normal life. I thought I found love that wasn't bought. And it turns out, Artemis said, a cold tear tracing a path down her cheek, that poverty doesn't make people noble. It just makes them hungry, and when they get full, they forget who fed them. I assume there is a man involved, Eleanor said dryly. The one you ran off for, the entrepreneur. He's discarding me, grandmother. Tonight, for a mistress who thinks she's high society because she owns a few Birkin bags. They're mocking me. They think I'm nobody. On the other end of the line, Artemis heard the distinct sound of a porcelain teacup being set down very hard on a saucer. Nobody. Eleanor's voice dropped an octave. It was terrifyingly quiet. A Kensington. Nobody. I'm going to a gala tonight, Artemis said. The Anthea Corp gala at the Pierre Hotel. I want to show them grandmother. I don't just want to leave. I want to burn the bridge so brightly they'll need sunglasses. The Pierre, Eleanor mused. We own the Pierre, or rather the holding company does. I need a dress, Artemis said. I need hair, makeup, jewelry, and I need family. Are you in New York? We are always where the money is, darling, Eleanor said. Your brother William is in the city for the UN summit, and I just landed an hour ago for a board meeting. Artemis, listen to me. Wipe your face. We are coming. I have 2 hours, Artemis said. 2 hours is an eternity for us, Eleanor replied. Go to the service entrance of the building. A car will be waiting in 5 minutes. Tonight, Artemis, you are not the rejected wife. Tonight, you are the return of the Queen, and God help anyone who stands in your way. Artemis hung up the phone. She looked at her reflection one last time. She reached for a towel and wiped the mascara from her cheeks. Goodbye, Artemis Anthea, she whispered. She straightened her spine, and for the first time in 5 years, Lady Artemis Elizabeth Kensington looked back from the mirror. Artemis took the service elevator down. It smelled of bleach and garbage bags, a stark contrast to the private lift Audrey and Chloe used, which smelled of fresh lilies. It was fitting, she thought. She was being taken out with the trash. But when the heavy steel doors slid open at the ground floor loading dock, the narrative shifted. Parked amidst the delivery trucks and dumpster bins was a vehicle that looked like it had been carved from a single block of obsidian. A Rolls-Royce Phantom 8, extended wheelbase with curtains drawn tight. 2 men in suits that cost more than Audrey's entire wardrobe stood by the rear door. They weren't hotel security. They were private military contractors. One of them stepped forward, a giant of a man with a scar running through his eyebrow. He bowed his head slightly. Lady Artemis, he said, his voice a low rumble. Welcome back. Mrs. Kensington is waiting at the St. Regis. He opened the door. The interior was a sanctuary of cream leather and lamb's wool carpets. Artemis slid inside, and the heavy door thudded shut instantly, cutting off the noise of the city rain. As the car pulled away, Artemis didn't look back at the Millennium Tower. She looked at her hands. They were still shaking, but now it wasn't from fear. It was from the adrenaline of a dormant identity waking up. The presidential suite at the St. Regis, New York, was a frenzy of controlled chaos. When Artemis entered, it looked less like a hotel room and more like a tactical command center for a fashion offensive. Racks of gowns wrapped in plastic velvet trays of jewelry, guarded by armed security, and a team of 4 stylists were already moving with surgical precision. Sitting in a high-backed velvet armchair by the window sipping a cup of Earl Grey was Eleanor Kensington. At 75, Eleanor was terrifying. She wore a Chanel tweed suit that was vintage 1990s, and her silver hair was coiffed into an immovable helmet of authority. She didn't rise when Artemis entered. She simply lowered her teacup. "You look terrible," Eleanor said flatly. "You've lost weight, and that cardigan is an insult to sheep everywhere." Artemis felt a lump in her throat. She ran across the room and fell to her knees beside the chair, burying her face in her grandmother's lap. "I'm sorry, Grandmama. I'm so sorry." Eleanor's hand covered in soft, age-spotted skin, and a sapphire ring the size of a quail's egg stroked Artemis's hair. For a moment, the iron matriarch softened. "Hush now," Eleanor whispered. "You tried to live a fairy tale, Artemis, but you forgot that in the original stories, the princesses didn't just marry princes. They survived wolves. Now stand up. We have 90 minutes to turn you back into a wolf." A side door opened, and a man walked in. He was tall, with the kind of devastatingly handsome face that graced the covers of Forbes and GQ in the same month. He was adjusting a platinum cufflink. "William," Artemis breathed. Her older brother, the current CEO of Kensington Global and arguably the most eligible bachelor in Europe, grinned. He walked over and pulled Artemis into a crushing hug. He smelled of rain and expensive scotch. "I should kill him," William murmured into her hair, his tone conversational but his muscles tense. I can buy the building he lives in and evict him by midnight. I can have his credit cards frozen before the appetizers are served." "No," Artemis said, pulling back. Her eyes were dry now. "That's too easy. He thinks I'm weak-willed. He thinks I'm a liability. I want to show him exactly what he lost." William looked at Eleanor. Eleanor nodded once. "Very well," William said. He snapped his fingers. The stylists descended. "The theme is Midnight in Paris," Artemis said, as they pulled the grey cardigan off her shoulders. "Forget the theme," Eleanor commanded from her chair. "Themes are for people who need instructions. You are not going as a guest, Artemis. You are going as the owner." She pointed to a garment bag at the back of the rack. "The Ely Saab custom, the midnight blue one. And bring the vault case." For the next hour, Artemis was scrubbed, polished, painted, and sculpted. Her messy bun was transformed into a sleek Hollywood glamour wave that cascaded over one shoulder. Her tear-stained skin was prepped with serums that cost a fortune, leaving her glowing like porcelain. Her eyes were smoked out with charcoals and shimmers, making her iris color pop and piercing ice blue that she usually hid behind glasses. Then came the dress. It was a masterpiece of deep midnight blue velvet and silk tulle, encrusted with thousands of tiny Swarovski crystals that caught the light like a captured galaxy. It had a plunging neckline that was daring but regal, and a slit that went up the thigh. It was a dress that demanded attention, but the pièce de résistance was the necklace. William opened the velvet box. Inside lay the Kensington Ters, a necklace of diamonds and sapphires that had once belonged to a Russian Tsarina. It hadn't been seen in public since the 1980s. "Heavy lies the crown," William joked as he clasped the cold weight around Artemis's neck. Artemis looked in the full-length mirror. The frantic mouse was gone. The sad housewife was dead. Staring back at her was a woman who looked like she could purchase Audrey's soul and keep it in her purse as a souvenir. "Are you ready?" William asked, offering his arm. Artemis took a deep breath. She thought of Chloe's smirk. She thought of Audrey's indifference. "Let's go to the Gala," she said. The Pierre Hotel on Fifth Avenue was the epitome of old New York glamour. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the flashbulbs of the paparazzi created a lightning storm of their own under the grand awning. Inside the ballroom, Audrey Anthea was in his element, or so he thought. He held a glass of champagne, shaking hands with board members and potential investors. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, but there was a sheen of sweat on his forehead. "Relax, Dom," Chloe whispered, clutching his arm. She looked stunning in her red dress, but up close the fabric looked a little too bright, a little too desperate for attention. "You've got this. The award is in the bag." "I haven't seen the Kensington rep yet," Audrey muttered, scanning the room. "The rumor is they're sending a senior partner. If I can lock down that partnership tonight, the IPO valuation doubles." "Forget business for a second," Chloe laughed, clinking her glass against his. "Look at us. We're the king and queen of this room. And to think you were worried about Artemis showing up." Audrey let out a short, derisive laugh. She probably took one look at the rain and went back to bed with a tub of ice cream. It's better this way. She would have been an embarrassment. "Total embarrassment," Chloe agreed. "She has no style, no presence, she's just background noise." Suddenly the ambient chatter in the room changed. It wasn't a silence. It was a shift in frequency. The murmuring near the entrance stopped, then rippled outward like a wave. Heads turned. Drinks were lowered. The music from the live jazz band faltered for a split second before recovering. Audrey frowned. "Who is that, a celebrity?" He stood on his toes to see over the crowd. The main doors of the ballroom, usually kept open, had been briefly closed by the venue staff to prepare for a VVIP arrival. Now they swung open. First came the security detail, 4 men who moved with a fluidity that screamed, "Don't touch." Then William Kensington walked in. A collective gasp went through the room. William was business royalty. He was the kind of man billionaires wanted to be. His presence at a mid-tier gala like this was baffling. He wore a tuxedo that fit so perfectly it made every other man in the room look like they were wearing rentals. "Oh my God!" Audrey hissed, gripping Chloe's arm. "That's William Kensington, the CEO himself. He didn't send a rep. He came personally." "Go say hi," Chloe urged, her eyes widening at the prospect of meeting a global icon. "Wait," Audrey said, squinting. "He has someone with him." William stopped at the top of the short staircase leading down to the dance floor. He turned slightly and offered his hand to the woman behind him. Lady Artemis stepped into the light. For 3 seconds, nobody recognized her. They saw the dress, the midnight blue velvet that seemed to absorb the room's oxygen. They saw the diamonds, the legendary Kensington sapphires, blazing at her throat. They saw the face of a high-fashion model poised cool and utterly terrifying in her beauty. Audrey felt his brain short-circuit. He knew the shape of that face. He knew the curve of that jaw. But it wasn't possible. The woman he left crying in a grey cardigan 3 hours ago couldn't be this goddess dripping in millions of dollars of jewelry. "Who is that?" Chloe whispered, a hint of jealousy sharpening her voice. "Is that a new supermodel?" Artemis scanned the room. Her eyes icy sharp, intelligent, swept over the crowd of investors and sycophants. Finally, her gaze locked onto Audrey. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She simply tilted her chin up an acknowledgement of his existence that was more insulting than if she had ignored him. She took William's arm, and they began to descend the stairs. The crowd parted for them like the Red Sea. "It can't be," Audrey whispered, the color draining from his face. "Artemis." A photographer near the front, a veteran of the society pages, suddenly lowered his camera and shouted, "Is that Lady Artemis, Lady Artemis Kensington?" The whisper turned into a roar. Lady Artemis Kensington. Audrey felt the room spin. Kensington. Numb. Her last name was Anthea. Before that, it was... He tried to remember. She had never used a last name when they met. Just Artemis. She said she was estranged from her family. She said they were difficult. He thought difficult meant alcoholic parents in a trailer park. He didn't realize difficult meant an ancient British banking dynasty. William and Artemis reached the bottom of the stairs. The event organizer, a flustered man named Gregor, rushed over, practically bowing. "Mr. Kensington, we had no idea you were coming. And Mrs. Anthea." Gregor looked confused. William placed a protective hand over Artemis's hand on his arm. He looked at Gregor with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Please," William said, his voice projecting clearly enough for the nearby onlookers, including Audrey, to hear. "She has reverted to her maiden name. This is my sister, Lady Artemis Kensington, and we are here to discuss the future of Anthea Corp." Chloe dropped her champagne glass. It shattered on the floor, the sound echoing in the stunned silence. Audrey stood frozen, staring at the woman he had discarded for being too simple. She was currently standing 10 feet away, wearing a necklace worth more than his entire company, looking at him like he was a stain on the carpet. Artemis leaned over to William and whispered something. William laughed, a rich, hearty sound. Then Artemis turned and began to walk straight toward Audrey and Chloe. The click-clack of her heels was gone, replaced by the silent, graceful glide of a predator. "Close your mouth, Dom," Artemis said, as she stopped in front of him. Her voice was the same, yet entirely different. It held authority. "You'll catch flies, and this is a black tie event." The silence in the immediate vicinity was suffocating. The air between Artemis, Audrey, and Chloe crackled with enough tension to power the city grid. Chloe was the first to recover. Her survival instinct, honed in the vicious circles of high society climbers, kicked in. She looked at Artemis's dress, then at the shattered glass by her feet, and finally forced a tight, condescending smile. "Well, well," Chloe said, her voice pitching slightly higher than usual. "Quite the makeover, Artemis. Did you rent the jewelry? It's a bit theatrical, don't you think? Trying a little too hard to prove you're not heartbroken." Artemis didn't even blink. She looked at Chloe with the mild curiosity of a scientist examining a bacteria sample. "Hello, Chloe," Artemis said softly. She reached up and touched the sapphires at her neck. "And no, they aren't rented. These are the Kensington tears. They've been in my family since 1912. My grandmother wore them to meet the Queen. I'm wearing them to watch you embarrass yourself. I suppose we all have our traditions." A ripple of snickers went through the eavesdropping crowd. Chloe flushed a deep, angry crimson. Audrey found his voice. He stepped forward, his eyes darting between Artemis and the formidable figure of William Kensington, standing behind her like a sentinel. "Artemis," Audrey stammered, his voice hushed and frantic. "And Kensington. Is this a joke? You told me your parents were... You said they were unavailable." "I said they were unforgiving," Artemis corrected him, her gaze icy. "And I said I left that life because I wanted to build something real. I wanted to be loved for me, Audrey. Not for my last name. Not for the trust fund." I wanted to see if a man could love Artemis, the baker. Artemis, the supportive wife. She took a step closer to him. He smelled of fear now. And you did, she continued, for a while, until the money started coming in. Then Artemis, the wife, wasn't enough. You needed a trophy. Well, congratulations, Dom. You're looking at the ultimate trophy now. And you can't afford her. I didn't know, Audrey pleaded, sweating profusely. Artemis, if I had known— That is exactly the point, William boomed, stepping in. His voice carried effortlessly. If you had known she was worth billions, you would have treated her like a queen. But because you thought she was nobody, you treated her like garbage. That reveals your character, Mr. Anthea. And character is something you cannot buy. Chloe, sensing her grip on the situation slipping, tried to interject. She grabbed Audrey's arm possessively. Oh, please. So she has a rich brother. Big deal. Audrey built this company from the ground up. He's the genius here. Artemis just sat at home. Artemis laughed. It was a dark, genuine laugh. Built it from the ground up? Artemis asked, arching an eyebrow. Dom, tell her. Tell her about the seed money in 2019. Audrey went pale. Artemis, don't. Tell her about the anonymous angel investor who bailed you out when the FDA approval stalled in 2021. Artemis pressed. Artemis, please, Audrey whispered, looking around at the investors who were now listening intently. It was me, Artemis said, addressing the small crowd gathering around them. My personal savings. That wasn't from baking bread. That was my quarterly allowance from the Kensington Trust. I funneled $2 million into Anthea Corp under a shell company because you were too proud to take money from your wife, but too desperate to refuse a stranger. The crowd gasped. Whispers erupted instantly. She funded him. She owns the debt. Chloe looked at Audrey, horrified. Is that true? Audrey couldn't speak. He just stared at the floor. I didn't just sit at home, Chloe, Artemis said, turning back to the mistress. I was the silent partner. I proofread every contract. I designed the initial marketing strategy. I cooked the meals that fueled the late nights. I built the throne you're trying to sit on. Artemis leaned in, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper that only Chloe and Audrey could hear. And tonight, I'm taking the throne back. Before they could respond, the lights in the ballroom dimmed. A spotlight hit the main stage. The booming voice of the announcer filled the room. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. It is time for the highlight of our evening. Please welcome the CEO of Anthea Corp, our Man of the Year, Mr. Audrey. Anthea. Polite applause followed, but it was thinner than usual. The room was distracted. Everyone was looking at Artemis. Audrey looked like a man marching to the gallows. He adjusted his tie, shot a terrified look at Artemis, and walked toward the stage. Watch this, William whispered to Artemis, checking his watch. The timing should be perfect. Audrey stood at the podium. The spotlight blinded him, which was a blessing because he didn't want to see the audience. He didn't want to see Artemis's blue dress shimmering in the darkness like a warning beacon. He gripped the microphone. His hands were shaking. Thank you, he croaked. He cleared his throat. Thank you all. This award. It represents excellence. It represents the future. He tried to find his rehearsed speech in his mind, but it was gone. All he could think about was the Kensington name. He had to fix this. He had to spin it. If he could publicly link himself to the Kensingtons, he could still survive this. He could claim it was a secret partnership. Anthea Corp is about family. Audrey lied, gaining a sudden burst of desperate confidence. And speaking of family, I am honored to have my partners here tonight, the Kensington Group. He pointed blindly into the crowd. We have been working silently together for years, Audrey announced, lying through his teeth. And I am proud to announce that with their continued backing, Anthea Corp will be expanding into the European market next year. There was a scattering of applause. Then a voice cut through the room. I object. It wasn't a shout. It was a calm, projected statement from the center of the room. William Kensington stood up. A spotlight swung over to him. He held a microphone that had been conveniently handed to him by a staff member. Miss Anthea, William said, his voice echoing through the stunned ballroom. I'm afraid there has been a misunderstanding. The Kensington Group is not backing Anthea Corp. Audrey froze on stage. William, I mean, Mr. Kensington. We can discuss. There is nothing to discuss. William continued, walking slowly toward the stage, Artemis at his side. It is true that Lady Artemis personally invested in your company. However, as of 6 o'clock this evening, the Kensington board has reviewed the assets. William stopped at the foot of the stage and looked up at Audrey. The entire room held its breath. We have decided to divest, William said coldly. We are pulling all funding. We are recalling the loans. And since those loans were secured against your majority shareholding, well, William turned to the audience, addressing the bankers and investors directly. The Kensington Group formally declares a lack of confidence in the leadership of Audrey Anthea. We advise all our partners to re-evaluate their positions. It was a death sentence. In the world of high finance, a public disavowal by the Kensingtons was worse than bankruptcy. It was a mark of Cain. Phones lit up all over the room. Sell, someone shouted into a mobile in the back. Dump the stock. Now, before the market opens in Tokyo. Pull the term sheet, another voice yelled. Audrey watched in horror as his empire crumbled in real time. The buzz of Man of the Year turned into the roar of a panicked sell-off. He looked at Chloe standing near the front table. She was furiously typing on her phone. Chloe, he called out, forgetting the microphone was still on. Chloe, call the PR team. Chloe looked up. She didn't look worried for him. She looked annoyed. She stopped typing, grabbed her clutch and turned her back on him. She started walking toward the exit. Chloe, Audrey asked, his voice breaking over the speakers. The audience cringed. It was pitiful. Artemis stepped forward then. She didn't take the stage. She didn't need to. She stood at the bottom of the stairs, looking up at the man she had loved. The movers are coming at 8 tomorrow, Audrey. Artemis said, her voice clear and calm. But I don't think you need to worry about packing. The bank will be seizing the penthouse by noon. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a single envelope, the divorce papers he had forced her to look at earlier. You wanted me to sign these, she said. You wanted a clean break. You wanted to give me $5 million to go away. She ripped the papers in half, then in quarters. She threw the confetti of paper into the air. I don't want your $5 million, Dom. I have billions. I don't want the settlement. I want the satisfaction. She turned to William. I'm ready to go, brother. The air in here is getting stale. Wait, Audrey shouted, running down the stage stairs, nearly tripping. Artemis, Artemis, please. We can talk about this. I love you. It was just a mistake. I was stressed. He reached for her arm. Before he could touch her, the large bodyguard with the scarred eyebrow stepped in. He didn't hit Audrey. He simply acted as a human wall. Audrey bounced off him and fell to the floor. Cameras flashed. Audrey Anthea, Man of the Year, lying on the floor in a tuxedo, reaching out for a wife who was walking away into a sea of diamonds and flashbulbs. Artemis didn't look back. She walked out of the ballroom, the train of her midnight blue dress gliding over the carpet like royalty leaving a coronation. The sun rose over New York City with a cruel, blinding brightness. It was the kind of crisp, clear morning that usually signaled a fresh start, but for Audrey Anthea, it signaled the end of the world. He hadn't slept. After the gala, he had been escorted out of the Pierre Hotel by security, not because he was dangerous, but because he was pathetic. He had spent the night wandering the streets of Midtown. His tuxedo stained his bow tie, undone his phone, buzzing incessantly until the battery died. At 7:45 a.m. he returned to the Millennium Tower. He needed a shower. He needed to charge his phone. He needed to call Chloe and explain that this was all a temporary setback. Surely once the shock wore off, the board would realize they needed him. He was the visionary. He stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the penthouse. Nothing happened. He pressed it again. The button didn't light up. "Problem, sir." Audrey spun around. Standing behind him in the lobby was the building manager, a man named Frank, who Audrey had tipped generously every Christmas. Frank didn't look friendly today. He looked pitying. "The fob isn't working, Frank," Audrey said, trying to sound authoritative. "Reset the lift." "I can't do that, Mr. Anthea," Frank said, clutching a clipboard. "The leaseholder has updated the access codes. You've been locked out." "Leaseholder, I'm the leaseholder," Audrey shouted, his voice cracking. "I pay the rent." "Actually," a sharp female voice cut in from the concierge desk. Audrey turned to see a woman in a grey power suit approaching. She handed him a legal envelope. "You paid the rent from a joint account," the woman said. "An account funded primarily by transfers from SEK Holdings. That stands for Artemis Elizabeth Kensington. When the bank froze your business assets at midnight due to the stock crash, the automatic debit for the penthouse failed. The lease reverted to the guarantor." "Who is the guarantor?" Audrey whispered, though he already knew. "Lady Artemis Kensington," the woman said. "She has authorized the movers. They are upstairs now." "Movers?" Audrey felt sick. "But my things—" "Your personal effects are being boxed and moved to a storage facility in Queens," Frank added gently. "Here is the address. You have 30 days to claim them before they are auctioned." Audrey took the slip of paper. Queens. He stumbled out of the building dazed. He needed to find Chloe. Chloe would understand. She had her own apartment in Soho. He could stay there. They could rebuild. She loved him. He found a charging station at a nearby coffee shop. As soon as his phone flickered to life, the notifications nearly crashed the device. Bloomberg Anthea Corp stock plummets, 70% in pre-market trading. TMZ'd billionaire heiress, humiliates cheating. Husband at Gala, video viral. Page 6. Who is Lady Artemis? The secret Kensington dynasty member revealed. He ignored them all and dialed Chloe. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." He frowned and opened Instagram. He went to Chloe's profile. There was a new photo posted 3 hours ago. It was a selfie of Chloe on a private jet, holding a glass of champagne. She was smiling, looking unbothered. The caption read, "Dodged a bullet." Dohushed en tansaurs to Mykonos. Hashtag single life. Hashtag know your worth. Hashtag no broke boys. She hadn't just left him. She was monetizing the breakup. She had tagged herself as single and blocked him. Audrey sat on the hard wooden chair of the coffee shop, surrounded by people rushing to work. He looked at the empty screen of his phone. He had no wife, no company, no mistress, no home. And then a video autoplayed on his news feed. It was the clip from last night. Artemis in that blue dress ripping up the settlement papers. "I don't want your 5 million, Dom. I have billions." He put his head in his hands, and for the first time since he was a child, he wept. Not for Artemis, but for the realization that he had held a winning lottery ticket in his hand for 5 years, and he had thrown it away for a counterfeit. Meanwhile, in the presidential suite at the St. Regis, the mood was very different. Artemis sat on the balcony, wrapped in a plush white robe, watching the city wake up. A spread of croissants, fruit, and smoked salmon lay untouched on the table. William walked out, reading a tablet. "Good morning, woman of the hour." Artemis didn't smile. She just took a sip of her coffee. "Is it done?" "It's carnage," William said with a grim satisfaction. "Anthea Corp stock is trading at junk status. The board has called an emergency meeting for Monday. They want to fire Audrey, but they can't fire him without a majority vote. And since he still holds 40% of the shares, they need a buyer," Artemis finished. "Exactly." William sat down opposite her. "The vultures are circling. They want to strip the company for parts, patents, tech, client lists." "No," Artemis said firmly. "The company is good. The product is good. Audrey is the rot, not the work. We built that code together at our kitchen table, Will. I'm not letting it get chopped up." William raised an eyebrow. "You want to save it?" "I don't want to save it," Artemis said, her eyes flashing cold steel. "I want to own it. Hostile takeover. Buy the debt, buy the dip. By Monday morning, I want to be the majority shareholder." William whistled low. "Grandmother will love this. You're not just taking his house, you're taking his legacy." "He said he wanted a partner who could navigate the sharks," Artemis said, standing up and tightening her robe. "I'm going to show him I'm not a shark. I'm the ocean, and he's just drowning." 3 weeks later. The headquarters of Anthea Corp was a glass monolith in the financial district. The atmosphere inside was funereal. Layoffs were rumored. Half the desks were empty. Audrey Anthea walked into the building, wearing a suit that was slightly wrinkled. He hadn't been able to afford the dry cleaner, and he was currently staying in a motel in New Jersey. He had been summoned. The board of directors had sent him a formal notice to discuss the restructuring and acquisition of Anthea Corp. This was his chance. Audrey had spent the last 3 weeks rehearsing his pitch. He would tell them he had a plan to pivot. He would beg if he had to. He just needed to stay on as CEO, even as a figurehead. He took the elevator to the 41st floor. The secretary, a woman named Linda, who used to bring him coffee with a smile, didn't look up as he passed. She was busy typing up her own resume. Audrey pushed open the double doors to the boardroom. The long mahogany table was full. The 6 board members sat on one side, looking grim. On the other side, at the head of the table, sat a figure in a high-backed leather chair, turned away from the door, looking out at the skyline. "Gentlemen," Audrey said, smoothing his tie, "I know things look bad, but I have a strategy. The market overreacted to a personal dispute." One of the board members, an old man named Mr. Henderson, shook his head. "Sit down, Audrey. You have no strategy. You have no capital. And as of 10 minutes ago, you have no company." "What?" Audrey froze. "We sold," Henderson said. "A private equity firm made an all-cash offer for the outstanding debt and 51% of the equity. We accepted. The company is under new management, effective immediately. You can't do that. Audrey slammed his hand on the table. I founded this place. Who is the buyer? I want to talk to them. I'll sue. The chair at the head of the table slowly swiveled around. Audrey's breath caught in his throat. It wasn't Artemis. It was Eleanor Kensington. The matriarch sat there, looking like a judge at the gates of hell. She wore a black suit and a single strand of pearls. She looked at Audrey with utter disdain. You... Audrey gasped. Eleanor chuckled dryly. Heavens, no. Heavens. I'm retired. I'm just here to ensure the transition is smooth. I'm merely the advisor. Then who? Audrey asked, looking around wildly. The side door to the boardroom opened. Artemis walked in. She wasn't wearing the glamorous gown from the Gala, nor the frumpy cardigans of her past. She wore a tailored white suit, sharp and immaculate. Her hair was pulled back in a severe professional bun. She held a tablet in one hand and a Starbucks cup in the other. She didn't look at Audrey. She walked straight to the head of the table as Eleanor stood up and moved to the side. Artemis sat down in the CEO's chair. She placed the Starbucks cup on the table. It made a solid thud in the silence. Artemis, Audrey whispered. Lady Artemis, she corrected him, not looking up from her tablet. Or Miss Kensington, if we are being formal, which we are. She swiped on the screen. Mr. Anthea, we have reviewed your tenure as CEO. Gross mismanagement of funds. Unauthorized use of company accounts for personal entertainment. Public conduct unbecoming of an officer. She finally looked up. Her blue eyes were clear. There was no love left in them. There wasn't even hate, just business. You are terminated for cause, Artemis said, effective immediately. You can't fire me, Audrey said, his voice trembling. I'm the founder. You were the founder, Artemis said. Now you are a liability. Security is waiting to escort you out. Artemis, please. Audrey took a step forward. We were married. We built this. Don't do this. I have nothing. Artemis paused. She leaned forward, interlacing her fingers. You have exactly what you had when I met you, Dom, she said softly. You have your ambition, you have your arrogance, and you have your freedom. You didn't want a wife, remember. You wanted to climb. Well, she gestured to the door. Start climbing, from the bottom. 2 security guards stepped forward. Audrey looked at the board members, but they looked away. He looked at Eleanor, who was sipping tea. He looked at Artemis. She had already gone back to reading her tablet. Audrey turned and walked out. The doors clicked shut behind him. Inside the room, the silence stretched for a moment. Well handled, Eleanor noted. Agenda item number 2. Artemis said, her voice steady, though her hand shook slightly as she reached for her coffee. Rebranding. I think it's time we took the name Anthea off the building. Agreed, Mr. Henderson said quickly. What do you propose? Artemis looked out the window at the city she now conquered. Phoenix, she said. Phoenix Innovations. Because we rose from the ashes. 1 year later. New York City was dressed in snow, a stark contrast to the rainy night that had washed away Artemis Anthea's old life. Tonight, the city was glittering. It was the night of the annual Phoenix Charity Ball, an event that had rapidly become the most exclusive ticket in Manhattan. Hosted by Phoenix Innovations, the tech giant that had risen from the ashes of the defunct Anthea Corp, the Gala, was dedicated to funding scholarships for underprivileged women in business. Outside the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the line of limousines stretched for 3 blocks, Artemis Kensington stood at the top of the museum steps, greeting guests. She looked different from the woman who had stormed the Pierre Hotel a year ago. That woman had been fueled by rage and adrenaline. This woman was fueled by peace. She wore a simple architectural white gown that whispered power rather than shouted it. The Kensington Tier's sapphire necklace was gone, replaced by a simple diamond pendant, a gift she had bought for herself. "Great turnout," William said, appearing beside her. He held a glass of sparkling water. "Grandmother is inside holding court. I think she's terrifying the mayor." Artemis smiled. "She's just negotiating tax breaks for the new headquarters will. Let her work." "And you?" William asked, looking at her closely. "How do you feel it's the anniversary?" Artemis looked out at the snowy skyline. "I feel light. I spent so long carrying his expectations, his failures, his ego. I forgot how easy it is to just walk when you're not carrying a dead weight." "Speaking of dead weight," William murmured, nodding toward the bottom of the steps. "Don't look now, but I think the valet service is short-staffed." Artemis looked down. The event planners had hired an external valet company to manage the hundreds of luxury cars. Down on the pavement, bundled in a thick, ill-fitting company jacket, a man was jogging to open the door of a Bentley. He looked older. His hair was thinning, and the arrogance that used to define his posture was gone, replaced by a hustle born of necessity. It was Audrey. Artemis felt a strange sensation. She waited for the anger. She waited for the pain. She waited for the vindication. But she felt nothing. Just a mild surprise, like seeing an old coat she used to wear in a thrift store window. "Do you want me to have him removed?" William asked, his voice hardening. "No," Artemis said. "He's working. Let him work." Later that night, as the ball wound down, Artemis walked to the curb to wait for her car. The snow was falling harder now. A figure jogged up, head down, clutching a set of keys. "Your vehicle, ma'am. It's the... The man froze. He looked up. Audrey stared at Artemis. Snowflakes caught in his eyelashes. He was shivering, whether from the cold or the shock it was impossible to tell. Artemis stood under the heater of the awning, warm and radiant. Audrey stood in the slush. "Artemis," he breathed. A cloud of vapor escaped his lips. He looked at her with a hunger that was painful to witness. It wasn't just regret. It was the realization of a life permanently lost. He looked at the museum behind her. The music drifting out, the warmth, the success. It was a world he used to own, and now he was just parking cars for the people who lived in it. "Hello, Audrey," Artemis said. Her voice was kind, which was the cruelest thing she could have offered. I read about the IPO, Audrey stammered. "Phoenix is doing well. The tech is incredible." "We went back to the original code," Artemis said simply. "The code you thought was too simple. Turns out people like simple. They like things that work." "I miss you," Audrey blurted out. He took a half step forward, his eyes wet. "Artemis, I'm sorry. I say it every day. Chloe, she was nothing. She left me the week the money ran out. I'm alone. I'm living in a studio in Queens. I can change. I can—" Artemis held up a hand. It was a gentle motion, but it stopped him cold. "Audrey," she said, "you're looking for the woman who cried in the bathroom. You're looking for the woman who needed you to validate her existence." She stepped closer, just out of the reach of the falling snow. "She doesn't live here anymore." A sleek black car pulled up. The driver, Artemis's personal security, stepped out and took the keys from Audrey's trembling hand. Artemis opened the back door. She paused and looked at Audrey one last time. She didn't offer him money. She didn't offer him a job. She didn't offer him pity. "Drive safe," she said. She got in. The door closed with a solid, expensive thud. Audrey stood on the curb, clutching the $5 tip the previous guest had given him. He watched the taillights of the car disappear into the snowy night, fading away just like his future had. He stood there for a long time until the valet manager shouted at him to move the next car. "Moving!" Audrey yelled back, wiping his face with his sleeve. He turned back to the grind, a ghost in the city he once thought he ruled. And high above him in the penthouse of the world, the Queen had finally stopped crying. And that, my friends, is how you handle a betrayal. Artemis didn't just get revenge. She got herself back, which is the most expensive luxury of all. Audrey learned the hard way that when you trade a diamond for a rock, just because the rock is shiny, you end up with nothing but a pocket full of dust. It's a reminder to all of us, your value doesn't decrease based on someone's inability to see your worth. Sometimes the trash takes itself out, and sometimes it even parks your car a year later. What would you have done if you were Artemis? Would you have helped Audrey at the end, or did he get exactly what he deserved? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice and karma, please hit that like button. It helps the channel so much. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. We have a shocking tale coming up next week about a runaway bride and a secret lottery ticket that you won't want to miss. Until next time, stay strong, stay smart, and remember, silence is the loudest scream. Thanks for watching.